Welcome back to our show. We're still chatting with Chandra about women, and this is really an encouraging story, especially after we just talked about the pay gap. But this one is really cool. Now, this is part of your journalistic work, which includes a recent article you wrote for Essence magazine. The issue is out now, and we often hear about Black girl magic. Well, this article is about Black women judge magic, and they're in Colorado. Let's talk about this. So how many judges are we talking about?
Yes, Governor Jared Polis of Colorado, where I actually am based in Denver, actually has appointed 5 Black women to the bench just in his less than 2 years in office. And it's an historic appointment, and the most recent being in July. And I interview, I should say, Governor Polis, and he said it's about time. And I feel like he decided that he wanted to send a message that diversity matters and representation matters. And that's what this article in essence is about, is the fact that these Black women have been tapped to share their perspectives and bring their backgrounds to the bench. And it's exciting.
It is very exciting. That's a huge deal. Why did it take so long for these appointments to be made?
Yeah, well, many of the women in the interview, they did say it's about time. And the governor corroborated that, because that is his quote, it's about time. So I think what's exciting about it is that it's an historic moment. He's obviously made it a priority to get that perspective. And these Black women, they are Black women in America, and they're going to bring that perspective to the bench. And and also you have to keep in mind just the aesthetics of it, to see a Black woman on the bench. And it's very difficult when you look at the talk of Black Lives Matter and all these issues, to say that justice is equal when all you see is white, particularly male judges. And so just the aesthetics of it. And there's one judge in the interview tells me that she walked into the courtroom, and this is the first Black woman judge in Colorado, and she says she was told, "You don't look like a judge." And she challenged back and said, well, what does a judge look like? So I think that their appointments are kind of the equivalent of that. This is what a judge looks like. And we need to have these women at the table making decisions in the courtroom and also off the courtroom with their colleagues.
Absolutely. And so, you touched on something that I want to ask you a little bit more about. Why is it so important? I mean, we know why it's important, but why is it so important to have judges of color? Now we're talking about female judges of color, especially now when we are talking about Black Lives Matter. We're talking about reform. So just talk to me about the importance of seeing, like you said, those aesthetics.
Yeah, the aesthetics, I mean, that's just the beginning, because it is a visual, and we need to make sure that we don't just stop at the visual. But I've written a lot about social justice. I've written stories about it. I've interviewed Yusuf Salaam from the Central Park Five. And so I've talked about these issues. And the reality is, these are women, they are getting a seat at the table. They are able to influence their colleagues. They are able to understand maybe some of the challenges that bring people to their courtroom. And I think that's where reform is going to happen, is when we have people who are more inclusive and representative of the community. And so it's just a win-win for everyone. And I must say, Governor Polis made these appointments long before we heard the name George Floyd and lots of things. So it's very important that he made this step not out of pressure, but it was obviously an initiative that he was very passionate about. And he, like they say, walked the talk.
He sure did.
Yes,
All right,
did.
Chandra, speaking of talk, where can everyone find your podcast, In the Gap?
Again, like you said, my podcast is called In the Gap by Chandra Thomas Whitfield. And you can find it on all the major platforms: Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Pocket Cast, Stitcher. So we're available there. And, you will find that this is going to be a very emotional journey for a lot of people, just sharing not only the pay gap, but just the emotional toll that it takes to face discrimination in the workplace. So I hope everyone will listen to it, and hopefully we can get a second season. So let's call it that.
I'm sure you will, because this
Yes.
was just the tip of the iceberg of the conversation. So for folks that
Absolutely.
want to hear more and go in deeper, they got to check you out in the Gap. Chandra, it was such a pleasure to talk with you. I know you're going to be
Great.
back.
It was great. I
All
enjoyed it.
right.
You're so much fun.